Alright, welcome back. Hope you're having a good day. We got us a Willow Leaf Ficus. I guess some people call it a salicaria, salicifolia. Some of the old timers even call it a nerifolia, I guess, or something like that. Got leaves on there that represent a willow, which is why the nickname is the Willow Leaf Ficus, but it is a ficus. Anyhow, I got this in March of 2019. It was potted up to right about that line right there, and it had a big aerial root coming off of where you can see I did a big chop right here. We'll take a look at that stuff later. There's a big chop mark there. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. There's the chop. But it had a big aerial root kind of dangling down from there. And I was determined to keep it at first. Everything I kept reading and learning told me that I'd wind up with a big bulge of inverse taper there. But I really wanted to keep it because I was so in love with the aerial roots. But then I realized that it didn't even have a banyan look to it or anything. It was just two roots that had dropped down. And so I repotted it in March of 2020. And you can see where, you know, it was up to there. Hopefully I'm showing you the picture here where you can kind of see the darkness of where I kind of pulled it up. It's pretty wild how when I went to go repot it after being that way even for a year, like even if I'd have bought it right after it was repotted, how much trunk there still was. And there wasn't any roots yet until you got down into here. It's recovered nicely and everything, but I did take that off as a cutting. That's the only cutting I've ever gotten to survive from this tree. And then actually did a video on this. I wired this up in July, so it's been 4 months now. It's about the longest I've left wire on, but it has been 4 months since this wire's on. It's really biting in some parts, looking like it's doing almost nothing in a couple other parts. Kind of surprised with how bushy this thing gets in other years, how it really didn't get all that bushy. I don't know if maybe because I cut off some of the sap flow when I did take that chop that it just kind of slowed the growth down. I don't know if you guys can see this, but, and I made it to where you guys could see it, but like that's the longest growth that it's got on there in the 4 months is that long. But you can even see all along it, nothing but little figs. And even up here in the apex there's figs. There's figs here. These are not edible figs by any means, but it seems to put out more fruit than it does actual growth. I'm not really complaining. I think it's developing nicely. But today I am going to go ahead. I'm going to take the wire off. More than likely, I'm going to rewire it, just kind of health of it when I get all the wire off and the couple places that it is biting in. I may just wire some of the secondary branches and let some of the primary branches rest a little bit. Some of these secondary branches are kind of coming up where I think they could be wired down rather than pruned off. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm also going to prune it after I get the wire off, but anyway, first I'll take the wire off. Alright, so the wire's off there. You know, sometimes before I start one of these videos, I have all this stuff in my mind I'm going to say, and I forget half of it. But I did forget to mention, I was going to mention there at the beginning, that the apex, the current apex, from here up, and then also this lower branch coming out of that big chop scar there, which we'll take a little bit better look at later, they were at one point kind of sacrifice-ish, where I let them kind of run way out there. And then as I kind of cut them back, that was also when I started wiring it, trying to get some movement in there. This, I've been trying to kind of treat it as like it's going to have a canopy up here and then the canopy down here. And, you know, there's a saying with a spot for the birds to fly through, but it's just such a big gap now. It's like a place for a flock of birds to fly through, so not really sure. I might either air lay it off or try to take a cutting. I've only gotten one cutting to survive off this, and that was the huge knot that I took off there. And I think it's because I got part of the aerial root to kind of come off with it to help it get started. Not really all that sure. But in the spring, I may take this off as an air layer. I may take it as a cutting. I might just, take another look at it and see how it's progressing by then. But anyway, I'm going to get in here. I'm going to prune it up fairly hard. I'm not going to defoliate or anything, just simply because it is November. Even though we're in Florida, I still don't want to take too much growth away, but I'm going to start up here in the apex. When I say this wire had been on there for 4 months, I really had touched nothing other than I have actually cut back the apex just a little. Was getting some really leggy growth coming up out of there. I wanted to try to force some more growth down here. Seemed like every time I did it though, all I did was force it to grow more figs lower, but again, not really complaining. I am happy with the way it's turning out. Some of the busier areas I am kind of hedging just a bit. If I was to defoliate, it would be a lot more picture perfect when I was done or whatever, but just don't really feel comfortable doing that here mid-November. Especially seeing how this is the only one I've got other than that little cutting, and of course that's going to turn out to be, I mean, I don't know, it's going to have an unusual trunk base, that's for sure, just the way that cutting came off. Actually there is, I'm going to go ahead and take that off now, but you can see there's a little tiny branch coming off there. It's right in line with that. I left it just because at that point I was kind of thinking growth is growth, but I am going to go ahead and take that off right down to the trunk just because it's too small. This one I would take off as well. It's another small branch, but it's the only one coming out right at that height, so I guess I'll leave that one as well as this one. And then just as I go, there's a few of these other little twiggy growth that are kind of just growing on top of each other a little bit. To every one of these ends almost has, can't even see the growing tip because there's figs on every end. This is that one longer one I was showing you earlier. I'm actually going to go ahead and cut nearly all that off. You guys can see all those figs that were coming through there. That's all right, I got a little more a little more aggressive than I was originally planning. Anyway, I think before I do much else, I'm going to go ahead work these wounds. I got this wound up here in the apex, and then I got the one down here. I'll work this higher one first. This was a chop scar where I had chopped off the original apex. Like I said, I had let this kind of grow. This is the apex right here, the current apex coming up off of it. I'd let that go as a little bit of a sacrifice. One of my other thoughts is before I air layer it off, I was going to wait for that to kind of heal up. But I also kind of figure if I was to cut this off as either as a cutting or an air layer, and then just be able to control it a little more as it comes up, that will eventually heal. But what I do is I just take and I open up that scar. It'll cause more rolling over. Sometimes I take a Dremel or something in there. Right now I've kind of broken the drill bit I was using on my Dremel, and I keep forgetting to order new ones, so all I have is my knife. And so, with the live tissue exposed there, that should do some more healing. And so now this is the bigger scar on the bottom. It's the branch coming out of the bottom. Too bad it didn't pop one a little bit closer out of the top here too. That would have helped heal it up, but go ahead and work this guy too. And so that just opens the wound up a bit, and again promotes some more rolling. I'll have to, as I've been considering the two fronts of the tree. Alright, I started babbling on about fronts of the tree before I remembered I had the camera zoomed in there, but this is what I treat mostly as the front of the tree, with that big scar right here, smaller ones right there. But again, I have more faith in that one kind of getting covered up over time. And what I was going to say is this will probably turn into a hollow of some sort, which could become a feature, but then of course now I've got the branches coming out that way. I don't really see any way to escape that, especially since this one's helping heal up that scar or whatever, so I can't really change that. But then this would be another proposed front. And if that hollow ever really does become anything all that interesting, I could maybe like ease it around something about like that. But that would be quite some time from now. Hopefully I get maybe a little more secondary branching in there and everything. But I also just kind of between changing angles around saw a couple more things that were bothering me. That branch coming straight down there did. This branch up here is a little bit too long compared to the rest. And then this one had a couple that are coming straight up that I don't think I can fix, along with that one too. And so I'll go ahead and wire it up and see what I got after that. Alright, so I got the wire on there. In the interest of something, there was it was biting in really badly right there and on the underside of this branch here. So I really did my best to try to avoid some of that. Like, as a matter of fact, like on this branch here, I only wired the secondary ones and didn't really anchor in the whole branch. Just gonna give that a chance to heal up. I could have crisscrossed it, but again, I'll just give it a chance to heal up. And I got all the bend I really could out of this before. I didn't really want to do just a big S like I could have when it was kind of growing out as a sacrifice. But then I was putting wire there just to hold it in place because I know eventually it's going to try to straighten itself up like trees will do, especially these tropical trees. But the more I look at it, I'm going to wind up, I think, probably trying to take that as a cutting in the spring. And just because everybody always says that the willow leaves are the easiest ones to take cuttings of. But since I haven't had any luck yet, perhaps I'll do an air layer there or whatever. It just kind of depends on how much time I have for it and everything. But I'm going to bend these into place. I'm going to try to just accentuate some of the bends that were already there. And since I already had it twisted up pretty good, sometimes just the whole reason even to have the wire on there is again to keep it from straightening itself out. Most of these are still nice and flexible, so should be able to get plenty of movement in there. And then even though I am pretty much planning on taking this off as a cutting, I would like to have some workable branches once I get to taking it off, so go ahead and put wire on just 4 of these branches, just anchored them to each other, again just to get a little movement. And so whenever I go to take the cutting, I just don't have a bunch of stuff sticking straight up there or anything. But it looks like that's going to be about it for the day. Got some decent movement in it. The tree should have a bright future.